Hey everyone, so for my behavior change project, I worked with an 87-year-old individual named Charlie. Charlie was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease about 7 years ago, and he currently lives in the memory care unit of an assisted living facility alongside other residents who have also been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia. So he moved into that facility at the beginning of this year, and right around the same time, he unfortunately lost his wife, and as a result began to experience some depression. And with that depression came a number of problem behaviors. Notably, he wasn't wanting to get up out of bed and leave his room, so he wasn't completing a morning care routine, and he wasn't going out to engage in activities with staff members and other residents at the assisted living community. So as a result, the target behavior for this intervention was increasing Charlie's independence and completion of a morning care routine. And that morning care routine consisted of a number of tasks, including getting out of bed, changing his underwear, getting dressed, washing his face, shaving his face, and rinsing and putting in his dentures. So to kind of break down each of these steps a little further into a more understandable sequence, we created a task list for Charlie's morning routine, and this task list consisted of 20 steps. Staff took data on the number of task analysis steps completed by 11 a.m. And 11 a.m. was chosen because after talking with caregivers and the director of the unit, that was the most realistic time considering the number of steps that Charlie was expected to engage in. So for both baseline and intervention phases, caregivers were given a daily checklist to record the data. So they simply made a check next to a box, next to the box for each step that was successfully completed. And then for each step that Charlie either refused or did not complete successfully, the box was just left blank. So before beginning the intervention, I met with the director of the unit and staff to determine Charlie's current level of functioning and his ability to perform each of the steps on this task analysis. So because there was that added consideration of his diagnosis of Alzheimer's and the associated confusion and cognitive deterioration, it was determined that he would need some extra assistance to engage in some of the tasks, but that he would, for the most part, be able to complete most of them independently. So, for example, for the task of shaving his face, it was determined that he would rely on his caregivers to turn on the razor and hand it to him, but after that he would be able to successfully and independently shave on his own. So for this program, I used a single subject ABAB research design. Initial baseline was collected for 5 sessions, and then we went on to an intervention phase that spanned another 5 sessions with a subsequent return back to baseline for another 5 sessions, and then a final return to intervention for 5 more sessions. So during both of the baseline sessions, caregivers engaged in their typical routine interactions with Charlie. They simply walked into his room, turned on the light, and said, "Charlie, it's time to get up, time to get out of bed." And then if he refused, they went about their normal interactions, typically just walked out of the room, and then he would stay in bed for the rest of the day. So during the baseline sessions, Charlie did not complete any of the steps on the task analysis, 0 out of 20 for each of the 5 sessions of the initial baseline phase. So then during both of the intervention phases, the task analysis was used to break down each of those steps. At the beginning of each of the sessions in intervention, the caregiver would enter Charlie's room and insert a preferred music CD into a CD player and press play. So this music served a couple different purposes. First, the music alongside with a verbal prompt from the caregiver served as a prompt for him to get up out of bed, and that was his cue to know that it was time to get up and begin his morning care routine. The other purpose that music served was during the research for support for this project, I found a couple articles, or an article supporting the fact that preferred music has been shown to reduce aggression in elderly individuals with Alzheimer's, and Charlie does have a history of aggression, so this preferred music was included to give him a sense of familiarity and to evoke positive feelings so that that risk for aggression when he was asked to get up out of bed and complete that morning routine would be reduced, and it would ensure his safety and the caregivers who were working with him. So during each session of the initial intervention phase, Charlie was given an illustrated task list. So the task list it included pictures of what each of the tasks looked like alongside words that described that. So the caregiver would begin by reading the first item on the list and then giving Charlie a verbal prompt to engage in that action. The caregiver allowed Charlie the ability to engage in that task independently, and then provided additional prompts and physical guidance as necessary. So once Charlie then successfully completed each of the items on the task list or each of the steps, he was given reinforcement in the form of verbal praise. And then this was repeated for each of the steps in the task analysis. And then once Charlie completed the final step of the task analysis, he was given a terminal reinforcer, which was a miniature Hershey bar, and this was determined to be a reinforcer after talking with Charlie's daughter, who said that chocolate was a big motivator, and so clearly we didn't want to provide that after every single step, because that would be highly unhealthy, but it was a big motivator to get him to get all the way through his morning routine. So after that initial intervention phase, there was a return back to baseline, and once again, in baseline conditions, Charlie didn't complete any of the task analysis items, 0 out of 20 once again. So then upon returning to the second intervention phase, things were slightly different. He was given the illustrated task list again, but then during these sessions, instead of the caregiver reading each of the items on the task analysis list, Charlie was asked to read the steps. And before any of the prompts were delivered, he was given the opportunity to complete that task independently. So we used some time delay during this intervention phase, and a prompt was only given after 10 seconds of no response from Charlie. So absolutely no physical guidance was given during this phase, except for those tasks which, like I mentioned before, it had been originally determined that he would need a little bit of extra assistance. So as I mentioned, during baseline, Charlie didn't engage in any of the 20 task analysis steps. During the first intervention phase, though, there was a dramatic increase in the percentage of the task analysis steps that he completed successfully. The average that he completed was 82%, ranging from 75% of the tasks to 100% across all sessions. And then in the second intervention phase, he completed an average of 84% of the tasks, ranging from 60 to 100% across any of the sessions. So you can see that, going from baseline and not completing any of the 20 task analysis steps to completing more than a majority, more than half of those steps, intervention proved to be pretty successful for Charlie. So there were a couple limitations in that the research talking about the applications of behavior analysis to this specific population, which is elderly individuals with Alzheimer's or dementia, is very limited, so there's not a lot of guidance as to how these principles apply. There's not a lot of guidance to what sort of adjustments might need to be made to make it as successful as possible, but results were really promising that the principles of applied behavior analysis can apply to this population and can be successful in decreasing problem behaviors. And a lot of the research that I also used to support this behavior change project shows that individuals with Alzheimer's and dementia actually have a lot of behavioral symptoms which are very similar in topography to younger individuals with a number of developmental disabilities. So there's a lot of promise in future research looking at the applications of behavior analysis to this population, and it was very interesting to do this project with a little bit of a different population as compared to all the other projects I've watched videos on, and to see how these principles can be successful in helping these older individuals succeed and kind of overcome some of the behavioral problems. So I hope that everyone else had a great experience with this project. I know I did, and I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the videos and seeing how everybody else did. Thanks!